Hey guys, what's up? It's Nicoozy here and welcome to the first installment of the Level Up series. Today, I'm going to help to hopefully improve your game in Apex Legends by sharing a few things I've learned from dying countless times with almost 1,000 hours played, while showing you what you should be doing in your next game to avoid the mistakes I've made and improve your skills faster. Now, a large number of players, especially the casual ones, feel as though they're getting left behind, can't keep up, or that they just suck. If this sounds anything like you, the good news is you actually don't suck, and it's most likely the case that you're not actively practicing the right skills when you play so that the most effective techniques become second nature. Even if this doesn't sound like you may still learn a new skill in the end, or at worst, the video will serve as a refresher for those of us that tend to fall back into bad habits. Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the game's core mechanics, but I still see many players falling into habits that either get them killed or increase the likelihood of putting their team at an unnecessary disadvantage. I'm just going to get straight to the first point here, and that's game awareness, more specifically minimap awareness. Okay, remember, first and foremost, Apex Legends is a battle royale. A game can suddenly go from looting a crate on a peaceful, quiet afternoon to a fully fledged all-out Star Wars battle between 6 squads where you're under fire from 3 different snipers, 2 shielders are looking right at you, and your only hope for cover is 2 blocks away where another squad is firing from. Oh yeah, did I mention that you also have no ammo? Anyway, what I'm trying to say is you always need to be aware of your environment and where you are in relation to your teammates and their positions. Unlike other shooters, in Apex, your enemies don't light up on your minimap whenever they make noise or start shooting. So the more intel you have to quickly discern their location, the better you can be at positioning yourself advantageously. By looking at your minimap regularly, you reinforce the habit of constantly being aware of the layout of your team, which becomes especially critical in the middle of a gunfight or if you decide to push an enemy team. And on a side note, if you're having difficulty identifying which arrows on your minimap correspond to which teammate, just take a look at the legends in the bottom left. The colors will correspond to the arrows on your map. Positioning wins fights more often than not, and knowing if you or one of your teammates are stranded will help you decide if to pull back until more support arrives or if to rush to the aid of your teammate. And as a result of making a habit out of minimap awareness, your formation will be tighter, more effective at working flanks, and generally better at taking enemy teams by surprise and overwhelming them to the point where they either have to retreat or they're forced to make mistakes. Now, a special note here needs to be made for all the people who run off into the abyss and disregard all of this, getting downed instantly and disconnecting right after, leaving you and your teammate at a huge disadvantage. And if you're lucky enough, these guys even blame you for not helping them. Now yeah, I understand some players genuinely don't realize how far they are from their team and support if they butt upon more firepower than they can handle or they get outpositioned, in which case minimap awareness will definitely help. Otherwise, just don't be that guy. You're not a team player when you do this, and you just generally make the game less fun for others. Just wait until you know there's no way to be revived before you abandon your team. Scouting ahead is totally fine. I do this often, always keeping the general direction and location of my teammates in mind as I break away from the group. If you do this, make sure to use pings so your teammates always know what you're doing. The other side of the coin refers to teammates who move way too slow and way too casually and slow down your team as a whole, but I'll get to that later. For now, staying on game awareness, a lot of players fall prey to becoming hyper-focused on their target and completely neglecting the battlefield as a whole. This brings me to my next subpoint, situational awareness. Now, fights in Apex often play like a game of chess, where if you're not looking at the board as a whole, you're sure to get blindsided or ganged upon by other players. What you want in every battle, ideally, is to fight one person at a time, or 1v1 for simplicity. Your chances of being killed increase exponentially the more squad members are focused on you. If you ever find that you're in a 1v1 and you begin to expose yourself, chase the enemy toward the open or toward your team, or stay in one position for too long while attacking, you are experiencing tunnel vision. At which point, it's probably no longer a 1v1 and you're about to get flanked or cut off from escape. Sometimes we all get caught between 2 or even 3 enemies where we literally have no other choice but to pray to the Apex gods that we can ramble our way out of this situation. But if you have the chance to reposition before passing the point of no return, taking it will increase your odds of survival every time. Well, more often than not. If you watch good players, They seem to be able to rush any team and kill everyone with no effort, but there are things they're doing subconsciously that you might not even be aware of, and that's due to practicing situational awareness combined with general game knowledge and good gaming techniques. Constantly paying attention to your position relative to your enemies, your cover, and how the fight evolves as it plays out will come as second nature to the point where decision making becomes automatic during fights. Now, this is important because something that's hard for a lot of players in Apex Legends is knowing when to push a fight or when to retreat. We've all been there. You don't necessarily need to engage every enemy you find, especially when you're starved for intel on their whereabouts and their other teammates. One of the telltale signs that you need to retreat, and I've fallen prey to this too many times to count, is when you're low on resources and you have no chance of downing your enemy. If you're being forced to heal constantly and you're burning through all of your ammo reserves, repositioning sooner rather than later will ensure higher chances of survival. Otherwise, you're going to be stranded with no way to defend yourself if that team decides to push you. Again, I see this all the time and it's happened to me more times than I can remember. Just like chess, fights in Apex are essentially back-to-back battles of attrition. Which is to say, the teams who can bring down their opponent's resources first, more often than not, tend to win the fight. Alright Nicoozy, I always know where my teammates are, I'm always assessing the battlefield as it changes, but I still get gunned down randomly while repositioning or can't even seem to escape. Well, this brings me to my next point, and this is probably the most important part of the video, and probably Apex Legends in general, your movement. Chances are, lack of movement is responsible for most of your deaths rather than gun skill. In order to effectively position yourself, whether it be traversing the map, looting, climbing, jumping, or even fighting, you absolutely need to practice effective movement while playing regularly. This category is the bread and butter of Apex Legends, and it's actually what separates the average players from the good ones, more so than aim. Most people already know about or have seen these techniques, but either don't bother to use them or realize how much faster they could be if they used them constantly. You're going to spend about 98% of your time in Apex moving around, so there's really no reason not to put them to use, unless you're a camper of course. I'll start with what I'm surprised to notice when I play pubs, whether it be with new players or experienced ones, and that is not sliding enough, or underutilizing slide jumping, or both. If you ever feel that you can't keep up with your squad while running, it's probably because they're slide jumping. I'll just explain what it is quickly so everyone's caught up. Slide jumping is a technique that gives you a boost in speed when you press jump in the middle of a slide animation, allowing you to cover more ground than a normal slide or regular running. You need to build enough momentum while running for sliding and by extension slide jumping to be effective. Otherwise, you're going to slow to a halt, potentially making yourself a target. After a while, you'll be able to feel your speed and judge when to jump to carry your momentum forward. So you don't really need to worry about dying from this. You cover distance a lot quicker when you slide jump between destinations. You can save large amounts of time when running to teammates' banners before they expire, rushing to a respawn beacon to bring them back, rotating from location to location, and even rushing to fights to get the third party. Now this is important because time is super critical in Apex Legends, and 5 to 10 seconds can and is most often the difference between a weakened enemy squad that hasn't fully healed yet versus a fully powered squad that has had time to loot better guns, upgrade their armor, and replenish resources. What a lot of players might not actually realize is that any ledge or edge actually gives them a free speed boost when the slide is timed correctly. Sliding right before you fall off an edge catapults you forward quite some bit, which can then be chained with other ledges to quickly increase your momentum to literally disappear from line of sight. Doing this lets you cover large distances, especially downhill, giving you a chance to heal. Healing while sliding is the most effective way to heal in the heat of battle, allowing you to replenish your health while also moving at almost full speed. You can also do the same thing when climbing ledges to give you a speed boost as soon as you're over it. This is useful when pushing a team above you, who is definitely not expecting you to move so quickly after you climb over a ledge. If done right, this will definitely throw off their aim, buying you time to put the odds in your favor. And if you haven't realized it by now, sliding is your most important movement tech, because it's the movement from which other movements are chained, with wall jumping and bunny hopping being more complex examples. You can also slide backward off a ledge without having to build any momentum simply by crouching and walking backward off the ledge. Besides allowing you to stay facing your enemy's location, it breaks their line of sight quickly unless they come closer, which can then open them up to a peek from an unexpected angle. This brings us nicely to the other critical technique that will undoubtedly make you more dangerous to your enemies, and that is abusing cover, or as it's called, peeking. With every gunfight, keep this in mind: cover is your friend. But before I get into that, I just want to say thank you for stopping by and spending some of your time with me today. In the end, we're all trying to get better at Apex, and if you feel that you've learned something, hit like to let me know, and subscribe to see all the content I have planned for the channel when it releases. It's gonna be good. Okay, now back to the video. Now, the one technique that's probably responsible for more deaths than landing defenseless while your opponent snatches the first gun from under you: peeking. One thing you'll notice consistently across the board with pro players, other than high situational awareness, zippy movement and good aim, is that they absolutely abuse cover. Now, this isn't like camping, that's not what I mean. Usually, players tend to think the only deciding factor in a gunfight is who can outgun the other guy first. While this is true in some cases where you simply can't avoid the 50-50 confrontation or your ego gets you in trouble, there's almost always cover nearby that's not being used to your advantage. Remember when I said that fights in Apex play like a game of chess? This is a big part of that. Sure, you could run and gun like in other shooters with some success, but without keeping this tactic in mind, you will die often and die fast. The goal of each fight in Apex is to deal as much damage as possible to your opponent while minimizing your damage and managing your health. Mainly, it's about stacking the odds in your favor and striking while the iron is hot. Just like chess. Playing aggressive does pay off, and Apex generally tends to reward those who play aggressive, but I've also seen players rushing blindly after getting a knock without considering whether or not they actually have a legit opening. By peeking and using cover in every single gunfight, you're able to do damage to your opponent while immediately being able to get out of their line of sight and heal or retreat if necessary. This allows you to control the angles you're visible from, because you have to keep in mind, as a player, you're exposed to 360 degrees where any opponent can see your body in the open. The more of these angles you can cut off from the surrounding view, the less chances there will be for you to get shot blindly from multiple locations. Now I want to take a minute here and make a point about retreating effectively. Remember guys, when you're running away from an opponent or multiple opponents, your main focus should be breaking line of sight as soon as possible. There's been countless times I've seen players run in a straight line away from enemy fire. Straight like Drake from Degrassi type vibes.
You made me do this. What you say?
Ideally, put as many objects as possible between you and your attacker and you will escape successfully more often than not. Say it with me guys, break line of sight. Getting back to peeking, using crates, ledges, doors, walls, etc. to peek and do damage to your opponents, combined with managing your health and making sure your shields are always charged and ready to handle damage, will win you more gunfights. The main key here is to avoid getting caught exposed in the open. It's best to mix up your peeking position frequently to become unpredictable to your opponent. If you peek the same angle multiple times, where your opponent is now aiming and waiting, all they have to do is pull the trigger when you peek again, while you have to aim onto them again if they've moved. Using a crate as an example, you could shoot from one angle, pause, then shoot from the other, even moving to a different location altogether if you're losing the exchange, which at that point you'd otherwise be wasting ammo and heals, something that catches even the most experienced players off guard. And with that, I think I've covered most of the points that generally most players don't seem to be aware of. One more final point I need to mention before wrapping up is something that your teammates are going to thank you for, and it's going to make you a more effective player overall. This is none other than looting faster. Yes, something as simple as looting faster is something we all need to hear. Think about it this way. Each time you loot, you put yourself at a massive disadvantage by being unable to use your weapon, move from the spot, or react as quickly to an enemy as you normally could. The longer time you spend hunting loot, the slower your team moves across the map in general, which works against you in three main ways. 1, it makes it easy for squads to surprise you and overwhelm you. 2, you miss out on valuable third-party opportunities. And 3, if you get no kills, you slow your progress down from game to game because you actually get no rewards from loot. In most cases, Players tend to treat Apex similar to an RPG and continually gather more loot and better loot as often as possible. Unfortunately, the hard truth is, and this is something I've had to learn myself, having better loot doesn't win battles. Over time, this makes the game feel stagnant and boring because we've invested so much time into getting such good loot that we might subconsciously feel we deserve to win, or at least not to die so quickly. Instead, your focus should be on gathering the bare bones loot that'll make you ready for battle, like a shield, a primary weapon, some heals if you can, but by no means do you need to be a fully kitted level 100 paladin to begin fighting. Dead bodies tend to have the best loot anyway because they've literally filtered out the good loot for you. Ideally, focus on getting into fights rather than preparing for them, and you will find you'll have more fun overall because you'll be spending more time actively engaged versus running around. And I think that covers it. The little things that will definitely help you to level up your game and speed up your progress. I'll be doing more videos on stuff like this as well as strafing and aim guides that actually help you across all FPS games. So subscribe if you learned anything and if you want to see all the new content when it releases. Let's have some fun. Nicoozy out. See you guys in the next one.